Hi, I'm Time Hack. Let's begin. Master Sergeant Roy Benavides of the U.S. Army and veteran of many grim battles from the Vietnam War. When the Master Sergeant was first sent to Vietnam, he was lucky enough to step on a landmine. However, his giant steel testicles protected him, and instead of getting dyed or being crippled, he decided to join the Special Forces and win the Medal of Honor instead. Because when you're this badass, why not? But it was just the first medal in his collection that would grow into a pile of every U.S. military medal ever. He was consistently exposed to enemy fire, daring death to try and work up the gall to try and take him out, but death never worked up the courage. The Master Sergeant ran around Vietnam being heroic as fuck and a paragon of awesome. When Roy retired, he convinced Congress to cancel a ruling that would decrease money given to aging veterans, the pricks. To convince Congress, he probably just had to stare at them with his icy thousand-yard stare that death itself couldn't make eye contact with. Richard Blass was a Canadian boxer turned notorious gangster. He hated the American mafia, who had an iron grip on Montreal's criminal underworld, so he and his men killed the mafioso on sight. The mafia didn't like that very much, so they sprayed a bar he was in full of bullets. Blass was fine. The mob tried again, shooting him twice in the back and once in the head. He got better. On the third try, the mob lit a hotel he was sleeping in on fire, but Blass just walked away from the inferno like he was the star in an action movie, then continued to kill the shit out of the American mafia. He did eventually prove killable in a police shootout, and it only took 27 bullet wounds to finally take him down. Lyudmila Polachenko, also known as Lady Death, because she was the reaper of German souls. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, she was among the first rush of volunteers to join the Red Army. They offered her a nurse position, but being badass as hell, she declined, insisting on being deployed into the frontline infantry. Lady Death killed 309 German soldiers and officers, as well as 36 snipers in epic long-range duels. Her name struck fear into the fascist occupiers of the motherland, and Lyudmila was one of the top snipers of all time ever, and the most badass and successful female sniper in history. Tom Crean was a heavy hitter during the heroic age of Antarctic exploration during the early part of the 20th century. This Irish explorer was insanely brave and nuts to pull off all the crazy death-defying feats he willingly pursued. He journeyed in many Antarctic expeditions, stayed almost a year on a frozen ship that was stuck in the ice, saved his party from certain death after they camped on unstable ice, and as they slept, their camp broke up into tiny floating ice islands. But Tom, without a to give, jumped from floating ice floe to floating ice floe, despite an assured end if he slipped and fell into the sub-zero water, and got help from the main base camp, and all his men lived to freeze another day. Tom sledded down deadly mountains casually, and marched hundreds of miles through frozen wastelands, time and time again, always with a smile on his face, his humor always present to uplift the other explorers, despite their grim situations. He broke new records, and was instrumental in the maps of Antarctica still used to this day, only retiring after the birth of his second daughter. Tom Crean was larger than life, and a badass that makes most modern manly men look like sissies. Canadian World War II hero Aubrey Coates proved the saying, during hardship and peril, a person's true colors shine. And his colors were a resplendent cascade of shining gold, worthy of a god emperor. His platoon was taking heavy fire and casualties from the Germans fortified in 3 farmhouses they were ordered to take. The lack of decisiveness was costing the Canadians dearly, so Aubrey took charge, hopped over cover and went headfirst into a hail of enemy fire, ordering their last tank to fire at the most heavily fortified farmhouse, then rammed the shit out of it. After, he jumped inside the ruined wall before the dust could settle, and went berserk on the defenders all by himself, killing most before the last Germans surrendered to just this single man. Not content with this epic feat, and still fueled by rage and adrenaline, he then single-handedly did the same thing to the next 2 farmhouses, accomplishing his platoon's mission basically by himself. But the brightest stars burn out the fastest. Aubrey's badass blaze of glory abruptly ended by a sniper's shot to his face. But damn, can you imagine the look on his comrades' faces at what he did? Master martial artist Morihei Ueshiba studied many martial arts as he grew into a man. He would develop his own style and name it Aikido and spread it far and wide for the rest of his life, his students giving him the title O-Sensei, or Great Teacher. O-Sensei spent most of his time in deep meditation and pursuing spiritual growth, culminating in 3 experiences of profound spiritual enlightenment, solidifying the backbone philosophy of Aikido, which translates to the way of spiritual harmony. See, here's the kicker. Aikido doesn't focus on attacking at all, a hard sell for a supposed martial art. It's all about throws, pins, joint locks, and using the opponent's strength against them, with little exertion to the Aikido practitioner. And all moves are non-lethal and have an emphasis on not causing harm. It requires no brawn, size not mattering, and is incredibly potent at facing multiple attackers at once. O-Sensei was challenged by many famous and prominent martial artists, defeating them all, with most becoming his students. There are a myriad of accounts of O-Sensei performing pretty much superhuman feats, defeating armed men barehanded, tons of strong experienced opponents attacking him at the same time, tossing the formidable warriors around like they were ragdolls, and he would decimate giant muscle-bound men 3 times his size without breaking a sweat. So good thing this badass was a good guy, because who knows what crazy shit would have popped off if he went down the dark side. O-Sensei was a spiritual warrior focused on peace in a century obsessed with violence, and his badassery is worthy of legend. Onegaishimasu. Baron von Sternberg really put the bad in badass, because he was one crazy evil prick. Being of noble birth made him a loony elitist, full of arrogance and pride. The Baron bragged about his noble ancestors, always claiming to cover themselves in the blood of their enemies, and he would have made them proud. He spent his time drinking himself stupid, brawling at the slightest provocation, and winning duels to the death. When World War I happened, Sternberg eagerly joined the front line as an officer and fought with insane bravery, leading his men from the front in suicidal charges. His bloodthirst never quenched. The casualty rate for officers in his division was 170%. The common soldiers, 200%. So, I guess everyone died, were reinforced, then died again but him? Baller. People called him the Mad Baron. When shit broke down in Russia to revolution, Sternberg wasn't having any of that communist nonsense. They were all peasants, and to him, only the noble elite or God-appointed king could rule Russia. So he vowed to fight the Soviets and reinstate the monarchy. He turned communist territories into burning ashes, leaving nothing but destruction in his wake. But even though he was a lunatic, the Baron knew it was a lost cause. He needed more soldiers, so he headed to Mongolia to restore Genghis Khan's empire and push the Chinese out of the country. The Mad Baron kicked so much ass with suicidal bravery, the Mongolians named him Gemsaran, the earthly avatar of their bloodthirsty god of war. He gave Mongolia its independence through his badassery, and named himself the successor of Genghis Khan. Then in 1921, Sternberg faced the Soviets at last with his multinational army. The communists had every advantage possible, but Sternberg, not about to let something like suicidal odds stop him, moved to engage. He lost. The Soviets captured him, and after a mock trial, a firing squad executed his ass, probably to the maniacal laughter of the Mad Baron. Fritz Duquesne was living proof that the truth is stranger than fiction. He was pretty much all action movie heroes rolled into one. Fritz was South African of French descent, and as a small child was already a hardcore hunter of all beasts terrifying that roamed Africa. His mom was attacked by a Zulu warrior, so Fritz killed the man with his own weapon at the ripe old age of 12. In 1899, he fought in the Second Boer War as a commando and was captured by the British. He escaped, later was captured again, so he just seduced the daughter of a guard and had her smuggle him to freedom. In 1901, he was captured again. Bet you know what happened. Fritz escaped to the US and began taking on random identities, and hilariously became President Roosevelt's personal big game hunting instructor. He was an expert con man, taking on any identity he saw fit to suit his needs. These skills proved essential in his epic-as-hell spy career that makes James Bond look like a bitch. When World War I rolled around, he joined up with the Germans for some espionage. Fritz snuck bombs onto 22 fully manned British ships, blowing them to smithereens. What? Not only that, he had his own property put on the ships, took out insurance claims on them, and after they exploded, he collected the insurance money. He was captured again, so he pretended to be paralyzed for 2 years. For 2 years, pretending to be paralyzed. And actually fooling people. Then he dressed like a lady hopping the prison wall to freedom. Fritz would be a spy in World War II as well, pulling off subterfuge well into his old age, and was successful at a ridiculous amount of impossible deeds. Fritz Duquesne is one badass it's hard to believe was real. I'm Time Hack. See you somewhere in space-time. Bye. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, bom boom.